In this final season of the Pac-12, USC's championship hopes for a season here in 2023 have diminished into a farewell tour. And of course, this one always means more than the rest. It's UCLA week, and we shall run it down right here at the Voice of College Football. It's Trojan Conquest Live. Matt Zemek right next to me, of course, on one side from Trojan's Wire. And if you're not aware, please, this is the week that you got to dive in on USC football coverage there with Matt on Trojan's Wire. And of course, our host here for so many shows, I can't keep track of them, Tim Prangley. There he is. Fight on. Guys, how we doing tonight?
I am just ready for this season to come to a conclusion and focus on the defensive coordinator search. And, who expected that, right? But that's where we are. Like this has just been depressing as heck. And let's stop for a moment and realize USC and its two main rivals, Notre Dame, we had Notre Dame earlier in the season. Now we have the other main rival, UCLA. But let's look at this trio, USC, UCLA, Notre Dame. All right. So USC and UCLA, both with their fan bases just totally irate at their coaches. Chip Kelly on the hot seat, and with Tony Siracusa joining us later, that we'll get some inside info on just how hot Chip Kelly's seat really is. But like Los Angeles college football is a total mess, and then Notre Dame is going to be on, wait for it, Pac-12 network against Stanford on Thanksgiving. Notre Dame gets the Pac-12 network treatment because it's so irrelevant, because Notre Dame lost 3 times. And of course, yet USC couldn't beat that irrelevant Notre Dame team. So USC, UCLA, Notre Dame, all in a pit of misery as we get to late November. It was not supposed to work out like this. Ugh.
I get it very weird. It doesn't matter, Mark or Matt. This is UCLA. The records. It's not just banter. This is the crosstown rivalry. I get up for this. If we were playing UCLA and Tiddlywinks, I'd be up for it. I'd be ready to go watch it. Growing up in Southern California, half your friends are Trojans, half your friends are Bruins. And it's just bragging. Growing up, my best friend, when I was young, he was a Bruin family, Bruin grads, and this is the game. And you talk to the players, they'll tell you. If you talk to the alumni and the fans, we say Notre Dame. But if you ask a lot of the players, they ask you, who'd you rather beat? A lot of them are saying UCLA because, again, the rivalry's deep. It's close. They know these guys. They probably see them throughout the year. The trash talk is deep. This game is important because both teams are reeling right now. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't salvage the year if USC wins this game, but it does a lot to make it a little more right. Or I'll put it this way. Losing this game would be the nail in the coffin for the season, just to be one that just for the ages to forget.
I will save some of my thoughts about this rivalry for when Tony jumps on, because, hey, if it's special for Tim, and it is, of course, as a USC guy, I'm just a college football guy, and therefore these rivals across the country, they mean something to me. And USC, UCLA, yes, there's something magical, something special about it. That's all there is to it. And regardless of the records, I'm all in on this one. And this will be my priority at 3:30 Eastern time on Saturday. And I have to change my set because the camera configuration changed our shots. And I especially set up the 2 helmets for the rivalry look.
Well, and Mark, Tennessee's just been so bad this season that Georgia-Tennessee game in the 3:30 Eastern window just doesn't have a lot of juice. You can say that Georgia's been, somewhat wobbly, but you look at Tennessee getting dump trucked by Missouri. So, yeah, USC, UCLA might be more interesting. And hey, Tim, I know you've said for quite some time, please, let's have USC, UCLA back in the 12:30 p.m. slot. Like you wanted that to be a daytime game, and you got it. And of course, this is old school college football tradition. Michigan, Ohio State, the noon game, USC, UCLA at 3:30 Eastern, 12:30, just like old times in the 60s, 70s, 80s. into the early 90s. That was just fixed tradition. Those were the national TV games. So fans over 50, 60 years old, like that's how they remember it. But we're getting this day game only because these teams suck. It's so ironic. If they were good, they'd be in primetime, as they've been in recent years, as they were last year for that very consequential game, the winner going to the Pac-12 title game. So we're getting the day game. We're getting those beautiful double home uniforms in glorious sunshine. It's one of the best visuals in sports, second to the Arroyo Seco on January 1st. It's the Mona Lisa, it's the Michelangelo of college football art, but only because these teams have underperformed.
Tim, I said this to Matt before you jumped on. I said it just struck me seconds ago that because USC's schedule has been backloaded, not just from a football standpoint, but from a status standpoint and from a membership standpoint in the Pac-12, Washington, Oregon, UCLA, those are all three of the schools that are going with USC to the Big Ten. So in a sense, USC and UCLA have already said, well, USC has already said goodbye to the Pac-12 and moved on to the Big Ten. In a sense, they've already parted ways with the old existing guard there in the Pac-12. And before the announcement of Oregon and Washington, which is only 4 or 5 months old, for a long time there when it was just USC, UCLA, Matt and I had the various conversations. And I thought, how odd is this going to be that this is a final game for USC in the Pac-12 and a final game for UCLA? In a sense, of course, they've got Cal, but this is, the climax of the season that these two would be saying, waving goodbye to the Pac-12. It's not quite as special and historic because of the other two schools coming along. But, a lot of Pac-12 folks out there have to be kind of maybe, choking back tears on Saturday, seeing another one of the great rivalries, probably in a sense, a lot of people wouldn't agree with me, but the marquee rivalry in the conference for the final time.
Yeah, well, the at least we're coming in as full members. The discount Ducks and a half off Huskies, they're coming in on the cheap. They're coming in off the clearance rack. But the two teams coming in at full strength to the Big Ten will be playing, and it is kind of cool. I mean, I like the fact Matt referenced it, the fact that we both wear home jerseys. It's becoming a thing now, but it was USC. UCLA started that up again, both taking fouls on plays to make it happen. But it wasn't that long ago where it is, but it doesn't seem that long ago to me where both teams played in the Coliseum. What's cool about this is it's going back to where it started. They both played in the Coliseum. That's why they both wore their home jerseys to begin with, and so it's
through 1981.
Yeah, and then so it really is. I mean, we mess with the Bruins because of the Bruins, but this is a really special rivalry. Just crosstown rivals. There's nothing like it really in the city, having two major Division I football programs battling it out like this right across town. And again, all the bragging rights, because it could be. It is personal because you work. I work with a bunch of Bruins. Everyone, it's intermingled throughout Southern California. So there's families. My brother-in-law is a Bruin. My sister, they got married on the day of the game just to get back at me and my dad. I know they did. I mean, it's that personal, Mark, in USC UCLA game. So I can't wait. I can't wait this game. They've got no offense. We've got no defense. This could be, amazing. Matt wanted to see that Iowa USC matchup. This is about the closest thing we can get to that, the Big Ten. Or sorry, the Pac-12. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we will talk a lot of UCLA football here in a few minutes when Tony Siracusa joins us, but I want to make sure that we cover our bases with Oregon. And you guys have been through this matchup how many times since the conclusion of the game? But I guess right on time here, cutting off the Oregon discussion would be Tony Siracusa, and literally cutting me off here. There we go. Tony, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right, guys. How you all doing?
Good to see you.
Great.
Good to see you guys
Good
as
to
well.
talk to you again, Tony.
Hey, good to talk to you, Tony.
Tony, how many times have I called upon you on USC UCLA week. This has been quite a few years running now.
Well, I got to think you and I have been working together in one capacity or another for about 6 years. So I'm going to say it's been about 6 years.
That sounds about right.
We always have the discussion about the uniforms and how it's the greatest visual
It
in
is.
television with both of them wearing the home uniforms.
Absolutely, it is. It is the most beautiful football game. And Matt was talking about the old days of an Ohio State Michigan game leading into USC UCLA when we didn't have all the cable options and everything else going on. And as a child of the Midwest, that, most of the time, by the time we get to late November, it's not the best of weather. It's a bit gloomy outside. And then all of a sudden this Technicolor just hits you right in the face after Ohio State and Michigan slug it out for 3 or 3.5 hours with USC and UCLA. And again, the combination of the uniforms, the typically bright blue, beautiful baby blue skies, and if at the Rose Bowl, especially with the San Gabriels in the background, it is just the best looking game in football.
It really is. And you and I have talked about this before. I grew up, I'm old enough that I grew up with both teams playing at the Coliseum, sharing the Coliseum. So for the USC UCLA game, the stadium was split in half in terms of the fan base. And that was really what compelled them both to wear their home uniforms. Was the fact that they shared that stadium. And to your point, out here on the West Coast, I'm not on the West Coast anymore, but out on the West Coast, it was you woke up, you watched the UCLA Michigan game, or if you were going to the UCLA game, you had a little portable TV with you, probably battery operated, whatever that you could, have out during your tailgating, and watch the Ohio State Michigan game before you went inside for the USC UCLA game, knowing that those two games more times than not determine the Rose Bowl competitors. And so it was that was that third Saturday in November. And I will tell you, growing up, the UCLA USC game being locked in for that third Saturday in November was always within a few days, give or take, of my birthday. Even as a kid, I did not care about my birthday. It was about the UCLA USC game. It was everything. My birthday, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. Yeah, whatever. We'll do whatever. That's fine. Whatever. It was all about the game that week.
And that was your birthday present, to get a Bruins win.
It was. Didn't happen very often back then. It really did not, USC ruined a lot of perfectly good birthdays when I was younger.
I want to stay out of the way here and soak up both the current 2023 matchup and wherever you guys want to take us throughout the history, and also the vitriol between the two.
Well, in terms of soaking up this year's matchup, it's soaked in bourbon or some other drown your sorrows beverage of choice. But Tony, at first item of business, I'm seeing the rumors on social media that Chip Kelly's done.
Sure.
Give us your insider read on if Chip Kelly really is done at UCLA.
I've spent a lot of time talking to a lot of people today within UCLA, with UCLA ties, close ties to the athletic department. The fact that we are sitting here at 8:20 Pacific Coast time on Monday night, and Chip Kelly is still the coach, means he will be the coach this week. They're not going to fire him as it gets closer to UCLA USC kickoff time. That would just be completely destructive. That having been said, Chip is coaching for his job Saturday. A win may be good enough, but not guaranteed. A loss pretty much guarantees he's done on Sunday. Not Monday, because then you got to start practice on Monday. UCLA's got to play Cal the following week. So it would or will be done on Sunday, with a loss for sure, even with a win possibly. One of the things that has been holding it up is the business theory. Martin Jarmond is a candidate for the Ohio State athletic director's job. And
Yeah.
has interviewed for it once already as Gene Smith retires at the end of the current academic year. It's a tough gig to fire your head football coach if you think you're on your way out the door, but leave that for someone else. Now, what I have found through our reporting at Last Word is they're not going to name Smith's replacement probably until March. That being the case, you're not going to wait. If you're Martin Jarman, that means you're not holding it off to see what happens with your job, your future at UCLA. You just have to do what you have to do, period. And you'll be around at least to figure out the back part of it, which is who replaces Chip. Chip's on a really, really, really short leash. You have an opportunity before you're going to the Big Ten, before you change conferences, to do something significant with your flagship program of football. Going in with a record of 6-6 or 7-5 or whatever they finished the season at isn't really the big push into the new conference that you need. And so, I think that, like I said, the fact that it's Monday night, they've started practice for the week for the game, and he's still there means he's there for the week. But next weekend or this upcoming weekend is a whole new world in the Chip Kelly watch.
I know Tim's going to want to ask you some questions, Tony, but I want to just follow up on one plot point. If Chip Kelly gets fired, then you have a young, very successful defensive coordinator there who's turned UCLA's defense around. And I know a lot of Trojan fans would love to poach Lynn from UCLA. And then if you're UCLA, you would hate for that to happen.
Right.
And so if we, deal with the carousel and the moving parts that are always part of every carousel season, the last few carousels, as you well know, have been wild. How much of a percentage chance would you sense inside the building at UCLA? Do you think they it does exist for Lynn to be promoted to head coach if Chip Kelly gets fired?
I think probably 50%, on a scale of 1 to 10, probably a 5. I would like it to be more towards a 7 or even higher. I think he is qualified for the job. I think you also have to go back to the lessons learned. And the lessons learned say, do not overlook the call coming from inside the house, because UCLA did that once before. They fired Jim Mora, had a perfectly good interim coach finish out the season, including the bowl game, who wanted the job, and instead Jed Fish is in Tucson beating UCLA. And so, lesson learned. They wanted to swing for the fences. Troy Aikman and Casey Wasserman wanted to swing for the fences, and they did. And, one of the people that I was on the phone with today extensively told me Chip doesn't even have Casey Wasserman's support anymore. And, Casey Wasserman was the guy who funded the entire going out and getting Chip Kelly and the flights back and forth to New Hampshire to woo him and all of those things. And he doesn't really even have Casey's support anymore. I think getting someone like D'Anton Lynn would be uplifting for the program. As you pointed out, and as I'm sure we'll talk about in further detail, UCLA's defense, ironically, is what has held the season together, which was the bane of Kelly's existence before. He's a young guy. He's got a very bright future as a head coach somewhere. You don't want it to be somewhere else.
Well, there's another person with ties. So here's my biggest concern. So when you guys, I'm not gonna lie, when you guys got Chip Kelly and USC was absolutely in trouble. we're starting to head towards that nadir with Mr. Helton. Sure. I thought there was a turning point. I was really worried. There's another name now that could be coming with ties to Southern California in Jonathan Smith. He's from Pasadena. Great coach. Was what's going on up in Oregon at Oregon State? I know he's an Oregon State grad. I know he's a Beaver, diehard, but he's got to think about his career as well. What are you hearing as far as, I know you're talking about from within, but what are you hearing from outside the university?
I have heard that they would have interest in Jonathan Smith and in talking with him. I am not sure how much interest Smith would have in the job. And I agree with you. He's got to look at his future, and nobody knows what happens to Oregon State, 9 months from now or 6 months from now or whatever. Nobody knows where they're going, if it's the Mountain West or if it's a reformulated Pac whatever. And he's got to worry about his future. He also just got an extension last year from Oregon State, one that they will have a hard time meeting financially if they don't have a significant new TV contract, regardless of where that contract comes from, whichever conference or whatever ties it comes from. So there is a more secure opportunity to go to UCLA. But having talked with Smith in the past and having interviewed him, I know his heart is really in Corvallis. Yeah, he's from Southern California. He's got ties down there. He recruits Southern California very well. But his heart and his passion is really in Corvallis. It would take a lot to get him to leave that right now.
Okay, and then just switching over to Saturday. You guys have some banged up quarterbacks. Are there any news going on that point? Because that's one thing, our ailing secondary, having like Schlee or someone else throwing the ball to be a lot better than your first two options. Is there any news on injuries?
Yeah, Schlee is probably less likely than is Garbers or Moore to be able to play. Now, you talk about USC's banged up secondary, and of course, Schlee is frankly not a very good passing quarterback. I mean, he's in there to go more, RPO with a little less P in the RPO. So it's it has been, the quarterback situation has been the biggest failure of Chip Kelly's offense this year. And let's remember, Chip calls his own offense. There's offensive guidance there, but he's calling the offense. And, you had the 5-star recruit in Dante Moore come in. And I think a lot of people were expecting Moore to be able to win the job pretty easily, and he didn't. And, you don't, when you cover UCLA practice, you don't see much beyond stretching and some special teams drills. And the quarterbacks are 100 yards away off in the corner where you can't really see them. But he went with this, rotation through the first 3 games. He had a conference games that had Ethan Garbers and had Colin Schlee and had Dante Moore. And there was really no sense of rhythm as to who was playing which series or which quarter or whatever. And he did that for 3 games. I think it really messed with Moore. The kid was a freshman, and he comes in with all the hype and everything that goes with being Chip Kelly's highest rated recruit that he'd had in his years at UCLA. And you tell the kid, you didn't win the job, but you're going to play. It's almost like a 3-game audition, but with all 3 quarterbacks. And as you saw the season go on and Moore play more, and even get some starts, the kid threw a pick 6 in 3 consecutive weeks. He never learned the progressions. He never made it down to look to his second and third reads in the progressions. When you go back and you look at the pick 6s that he threw, I mean, man, he was staring down the receiver. They really didn't take a lot of work on the part of the defensive backs to be able to do this. So the quarterback rotation has never made sense. And then when you have Moore and Schlee, and let's just use those 2 as your pairing for an example, they are completely different skill sets. I mean, Moore is not, you're still trying to run DTR's old offense with Moore, a guy who is not a significant running threat. He's not DTR. He's not going to, roll out and be as much of a threat to tuck it and run as, he is to throw it downfield. The kid's got a cannon for an arm. Let him play in the pro style offense. But instead of molding the offense to the talent he had on the field, Chip was trying to shoehorn the quarterbacks into what he wanted to run. And then you've got Schlee, who's a running quarterback. So when that's your pairing right there, if you're the offensive line, you got to turn around and look to see who the quarterback is from one series to another to know what scheme you're running. It was a disaster from the beginning. And so now what you have is 3 quarterbacks, all 3 of them banged up to different degrees of health, and none of them playing well. And that's what you go into rivalry week with. And honestly, that rests on Chip.
Oh, you paired offensive line disaster together, because that's where I was going next. USC's had its issues, a big part of the offense. I mean, we're still had to put up great numbers, but when USC needed pass protection, or when USC needed 2 or 3 yards, there were issues on the right side of our line. But going back to that Utah game, where I thought you guys really should have gone into right cycles and stole that one. But it did look, the issue in that game was the one of the pick sixes you were talking about, but also your offensive line. And that's been a concern. And maybe that's been the issue. You can't get your second progression if you got people all over you. So as far as USC's defense, how is USC going to get to UCLA, do you think?
I think that when you hide the blitzes the way USC has the ability to, you're going to have shots at the quarterback. UCLA's offensive line has not proven that they stunt very well. They don't move the line very well. They play straight up offensive. They play a straight up push pretty well. And a lot of that has to do with the running backs are really kind of bruising running backs. You're not looking at, TJ Harden has got some good speed, but you're not looking at huge outside threats. UCLA's running game is really off tackle. And so the offensive line is really built for that push forward. Not a lot of successful stunting to protect trap plays. So if SC is bringing blitzes and hiding them well, it could be a long day for the UCLA quarterbacks.
Let's flip it to the other side. I think UCLA's path to victory here is to force turnovers. It's going to have to make some high impact plays on defense. And, USC's offensive line not been nearly as good as most of us, including myself, thought it would be. And of course, UCLA has figured out the defensive side of the ball and has played consistent, tough, physical football throughout this Pac-12 season. You can find a few exceptions, like Oregon State. That game got away from the UCLA defense. But for the most part, this defense has been consistent, reliable, tough, the exact opposite of how it was a year ago, at least to a certain degree. So what are the odds you'd assign to UCLA's ability to dominate the matchup up front against USC's offensive line, which is the gateway toward, strip sacking Caleb Williams, forcing some bad throws? What are the odds you'd assign to that?
I think they're good, actually. I think again, it's ironic that all of those years, UCLA's defense was the bane of Chip Kelly's existence. He stuck with Jerry Azzinaro, his old friend, as the defensive coordinator, even when all the evidence said Santa Claus had to go, and he was just adamant. And that's part of the stubbornness that is Chip Kelly. And while all head coaches are stubborn, it was, so detrimental to the entire program. He gets D'Anton Lynn in there this year, and boy, is it different. Now, part of the reason it's different is the talent that's on the defense. A huge part of it is the use of the talent. Now, Tony, you talked about, a big part of the game being turnovers. UCLA's defense does not rank high nationally in forcing turnovers, but it is the number 1 overall defense in the country in terms of giving up rushing yards per game. They only give up 70 yards per game on the ground. And it is really blitzes from the outside. they've only given up 2 rushing touchdowns the entire season. If you haven't seen edge rusher Leatu Latu, boy, keep your eyes on this guy Saturday. Yeah. He is something special. He truly is. Transferred from Washington, coming out of a medical retirement after surgery on his neck, was told you can never play again. You're risking damage. He went into the UCLA Medical Center. They ran tests for weeks, and mobility tests and structural tests on his neck. And they're like, actually, the surgery went so well, we think you can play. He had a good year last year. He is having a phenomenal year this year. I will, we'll tell you things that we're not supposed to talk about the votes too much as we start to enter our Football Writers Association ballots. But I will tell you that out of all the defensive players, as we go position by position, out of the 450 or 460 members we have, he was the biggest vote getter on defense out of any position. He dominated his position in the votes by that much. Honestly, I got to think that he is probably one of the top 2 edge rushers USC will have seen all year. You've got the Murphy twins, who go back and forth, defensive line, linebacker can play on the edge. You can move them around a lot, and they're very elite. So I think that, UCLA tends to be a little vulnerable in one-on-one matchups on the outside with receivers. They play well over the middle, but on the outside, they are a little bit more vulnerable. If you're UCLA, that scares you because of Caleb Williams' mobility and his ability to throw on the run, hit the outside, make plays where they didn't exist, when it's not where the play was designed to go kind of thing. And Williams is playing, school ground football, and it works because his receivers are always moving and staying open. So the key for UCLA's defense is to stay disciplined in the secondary. You're going to be able to penetrate the USC backfield. You're going to force Williams to move. You're probably going to have a relatively high degree of success against the running game. The key is for the defensive backs to stay disciplined with your man. Do not cut off your coverage because you see Williams take off and you think you're going to go get him. That discipline is going to be fundamental. Let him take off. Let him hit the edge. Let him get his 5, 6, 7, 8 yards on the ground. Don't give up the 30-yard pass play because you bailed out on the receiver.
Yeah, UCLA's against yards per play, not only in their running, but just overall, is 6th in the nation at 4.3.
Yep.
Going up against USC's offense, which is number 5 in the nation, just a little over 7 yards, 7.1 yards per play. That's going to be the interesting side. And again, the mess on the flip side is going to be interesting because I think that's where actually it's going to be won. I think that I don't think SC is going to be able to have a lot of success. I think that your pass rush, like you said, with Latu and the Murphy twins, that's going to be that's been our Achilles heel big time. We saw a nasty pass rush Notre Dame. We saw just last Saturday with Oregon athletes getting outside and running him down, not letting him get comfortable back there. That's going to be really interesting. I think whichever weakness, who steps up, USC's defense or your offense, because that's why I'm really curious. That's why it's hinging on. I'm curious to see if you're going to be able to. The big thing for me is will you guys will we see Garbers? Because I think your guys' best chance to win is if Garbers can get out there remotely healthy.
I agree. Schlee's not the answer, and I do think Schlee is less likely to see the snaps. You worry about throwing a true freshman out there who's already been through the grinder this year and putting him out in a full Coliseum, a rivalry game, and all of that. So I think I would agree with that it's critical for UCLA if they see more Garbers than anything else.
One thought here real quick is that, it's a little bit more complicated than this, but a good starting point that I usually look at when a offense is this inept versus a defense that is the same is that it's almost contingent on the offense to execute, meaning even a bad defense can't throw and catch for you. So if the throws are off, dropped passes, missed blocks, even against bad defenders, they're going to shoot through gaps if there are missed assignments along the offensive line. That usually the weakness on weakness matchup favors the defense because it's still incumbent on the offense to execute. That's one thought.
Yeah.
And also, I'm a bit curious because I'm trying to think what games I've seen UCLA. I don't know that I've watched them play start to finish. I saw some of the Oregon State games, some of the Utah game, and so forth, and a few other matchups. But 35th in the nation in total offense. Now, of course, they've been completely shut down here the last few weeks against Arizona State. But they obviously, now one consideration there is their non-conference schedule was super light. So they bulked up on those numbers, but that's only 3 out of 10 games. So at one point in this season, there was offensive production there somewhere.
There was, I think, a couple of things. One, to take your first point real quick, I think what you're talking about really is just opportunities, period. In a game like this, the offense, if you've got a struggling offense and a defense that's vulnerable, you're talking about you cannot miss out on the opportunities. In college football now, with the change in the clock and so on, you're looking at 60 to 65 plays on offense per game. So you're down about 10, 12, maybe 15 plays over what it used to be. You cannot miss those opportunities when they're in front of you, especially in an emotional game like this. In terms of in terms of how that flows and how that works through, UCLA, obviously, with whatever quarterback they've got to have a diversified offense. Sorry, what was the second point again? I went on for so long.
Well, it was basically that we know that the non-conference schedule was super
UCLA's
soft,
offense,
35th in the nation, and in again, not diving in deep into the metrics, but total offense number 35.
Sure. Yeah, we have looked at the metrics and because that's the kind of nerds we are here. It really is a bit of a slide because you did have the big numbers in the out of conference games. You had some opponents that were pretty easily overmatched, but over the last month, those numbers you would have seen UCLA about top 25, top 23 about 6 weeks ago. Now they're 35 and sliding in the wrong direction, and in large part the last 2 games. But the offensive production has just been inconsistent over the last month, and that's got to concern you if you're UCLA, because Caleb Williams is going to put up some points. They just are. There's too much talent between him, his receivers. They're going to put up some points. I don't think UCLA has to worry about a shootout. This isn't a 55-48 game by any stretch. But you've got to put up some points and you've got to take advantage of opportunities when they're there. UCLA, again, does not create a lot of turnovers. You get 1 or 2, you have to, you cannot settle for field goals. You cannot have the epic failures in the red zone that you had with Chip Kelly play calling against Arizona State last week. It has got to be touchdowns every time, and you have to be perfect in the red zone.
And yet this team is only a 5.5 point underdog. So
Vegas is having a weird week. Oregon State's a 1 point favorite over Washington. So it's a weird, it's a strange week in a lot of places.
Tony, I know we bring you on for UCLA insight, analysis, reportage, but I think you learn something when you talk to an evaluator of an opponent of a rival school, looking in at our own school. So what is your expert evaluation of the state of USC football? Want to learn from you. We talk amongst ourselves as a USC community. Tim and I have been kicking things around all season, and Tony Altamore, Rick Anaya, other folks on our own shows, but we want to get the Bruin experts' take on Diagnosis USC, what you think failing the program, and if you just put on a Trojan hat, I know it's icky for you, so you just put on a Trojan hat for a few seconds. How would you go about solving the problems that exist with USC football?
Look, I think that a lot was expected of Lincoln Riley when he got there, and appropriately so. You handed him the keys to the city, and you handed him the keys to, a Mercedes-Benz that was in desperate need of a tune-up, but it was still a Mercedes-Benz. And he's done okay. Certainly, there's some upside, but you don't see a trending upside, and that would concern me. What you don't see is the struggles early on, but we fixed them and we're moving in this direction. What you see is inconsistency. And when you think you've turned the corner, you're getting slapped in the back of the head by someone who really shouldn't be on the field with you if you're looking at a talent to talent comparison. Clearly, the defense has been the bane of USC's existence for the last year plus, almost 2 years. I would well imagine that before too long, Zach Arnett is on the phone with Lincoln Riley, talking to him. Arnett is a very good defensive coordinator, very aggressive. Was really kind of done wrong by Mississippi State. I mean, I get it. They when you're looking at their conference record, they were like, we're not really going anywhere. But goodness gracious sakes alive, the man had to pick up, when his mentor died, take over the job for the last few weeks in the bowl game. And he struggled this year. He hasn't even coached a full season, hasn't even coached 12 games yet, and you're already showing him the door. He is, I will tell you from a national standpoint and all the coaches I talk to across the country, he is a very highly regarded defensive coach. And, that is Lincoln Riley's weak spot. That's as he's driving the Mercedes, that's his blind spot is the defense and what to do with it. USC did a terrific job with recruiting on offense. The defense was a little bit of recruiting, a lot of transfer portal, and it never blended. The schemes didn't blend. The players didn't blend. There was no there was no logic to what you were seeing on the field from 1 week to the next. So look, I know that there's already some impatience with Lincoln Riley, and I know Oklahoma fans sit there and say, look at us and look at you. But I think that there's still a good future there with Lincoln Riley and USC, but he's got to quickly patch up the holes in the, get out the Bondo and patch up the holes in the Mercedes, starting with getting the best shouldn't even be someone he's already familiar with, and I know that that's what happened with Grinch. He had that comfort factor, forget comfort factor. Go out and find the best defensive coordinator who's available. Find one who isn't even available, who's already at somewhere else, but is so good you can give him whatever he needs to lure him to USC, and go get that person, because you're going to get a couple more years to prove your value, prove your worth, and it's going to be based on that.
Before Tim jumps in, my follow-up. Okay, if you're UCLA, and of course rivals, like UCLA fans loved Clay Helton. He did a fantastic job at USC, right?
He was one of our favorite. He and Larry Smith and Paul Hackett. Those were our favorite USC coaches.
Yes, absolutely. Ted Tollner as well. But so if you're sitting there at UCLA and you say, I want Lincoln Riley to hire this guy as defensive coordinator, and conversely, who's the guy you definitely do not want Lincoln Riley to hire as defensive coordinator? Best case, worst case, like one name which would generally represent both ends of the spectrum for you.
If you're UCLA, you want him to kiss and make up with Alex Grinch, before this weekend. I would be fearful if he hired Zach Arnett. I really would. Arnett's a good recruiter. He's a good tactician, and it would be an immediate improvement over what they've had. If you're UCLA, you want them to hire someone who's got to find his way around Southern California and national recruiting. Look, much the same way we talked about UCLA's opportunity for a head coaching change going into a new conference, this is the same thing for USC at a lower level, because you're talking about a coordinator instead of a head coach. The opportunity should be easy to find someone who wants the job. You're going to the Big Ten. You're going to be playing Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State, and you're going to be the primetime games. You're not going to have to worry about, talking about what it's like to play on, Pac-12 after dark with 50 people watching. You're going, even when you're playing Rutgers, it's going to be enough of a curiosity for the networks to make a big deal out of it, right? So it shouldn't be that difficult to go find somebody. There are a lot of opportunities out there. Certainly the money is there. But the new bright, shiny lights are going to help recruiting for UCLA, for USC, playing these marquee games against these marquee schools, having them come out to LA. It's going to help your recruiting footprint, right? You're going to be able to recruit better in the Midwest than what either school's been able to do in a long time, because you're going to be there making an impression. So, I think there are several opportunities. If you're UCLA, you fear USC finding someone who is able to make that immediate impact, step in week one and have that cachet, have that marquee value to them.
Yeah, you just talked about Zach Arnett. People have also brought up SMU defensive coordinator Scott Simons. But I mean, I've been getting really hungry, and I've been thinking about, like, for instance, Baylor's not winning games right now, and we've gone back and forth. And there's also the Jim Leonhard talk,
right?
So we get what I've been trying to say to guys. Everyone's all hooked up and worried about NIL and up in Oregon NIL. But in reality, if you get a coach that these guys know there's a name brand that's going to get you straight to the NFL, that goes a long way for these kids. That's what these families and these kids really want to hear, not the short-term money. They want to get to the NFL. My question to you is, so does Jim Leonhard. Jim Leonhard wants to get to the NFL and coach the NFL. And I just want to hear your expert opinion, Tony. You do well at USC as a defensive coordinator. You can skip that head coaching gig at college and maybe get a shot at going straight to the NFL if you can show dominance at the college level at a school like USC, where you can recruit NFL quality guys. Do you think that USC is in a position to get someone like a Jim Leonhard based on that alone?
Couple things. One, I think Leonhard is a very, very good defensive coach. I think it would be a huge get for USC. If you're USC, though, you have to know and be okay with the fact you're a temporary stopping point. Are you okay with Leonhard being there for 2 or 3 years, knowing that, by year 3, with any modicum of success, he's got his eyes looking not for a college head coaching job, but I agree with you that he's looking for an NFL gig. Are you okay with that? And if you are, if you're really looking for the guy that, you're going to rent for a couple of years to turn it around, and if you do that, from a USC standpoint, you're saying, look, we're looking for the guy to make us a good defensive school. Because after that, we're going to be able to get other good defensive coaches based on what Leonhard did. And if you're okay with that, then Leonhard would be a good get. I hear you talking about Baylor, and I hear a lot of people talking about Baylor, and for as bad of a season as they're having, Dave Aranda is still a really good coach. and I don't know if he's going to survive this year. You know, he's had a good run at Baylor. He's brought some good things to Baylor. He certainly helped clean up the stench that existed at Baylor when he was hired. But I don't know if he's going to, and look, he's got Southern California ties too. He was born and raised in Southern California, went to college at Cal Lutheran, I believe. So, you know, I wouldn't, you know, look past someone like Dave Aranda, who is going to have to spend some time. When you've been fired from Baylor or any other Power 5 school, you're generally not going to get another Power 5 gig somewhere. You can go be a head coach at a Group of 5 school, or, you know, somewhere like that while you resurrect yourself. You know what? If you're Dave Aranda, would you rather go to a D5 school to start working your way back up, or would you rather take the defensive coordinator job back home at USC, which is going to fast track you? Any success you have there is going to fast track you to whatever you want next a lot faster than going to a G5 school is going to. So, you know, if he's available, honestly, if you can wait until second week of December, maybe, I don't know, maybe get with the early signing period, we now fire coaches in mid-November instead of waiting for the season to end. If he's available in the next few weeks, to me, he's the first call.
Yeah, he's I was earlier talking about families and recruits and NFL and cachet and that name.
Yep.
Right there, this recruiting class is struggling. Mm-hmm. This entire Bosco class and a lot of guys over at Mount Israel, it would change the recruiting landscape overnight if they made that kind of splash hire.
Absolutely. So, he brings instant name credibility. He brings success. He brings some, you know, cachet with him. And being a Southern California guy, he knows the landscape out here. And having coached for the last however many years it is, 3-4 years in the state of Texas, he's got great ties coaching in the Big 12. He's got great Midwest ties. I think that would be a huge get for USC. It would make me, as a UCLA person, it would make me want to hang on to D'Anton Lynn even more, frankly.
Tony, looking at the Big Ten, you know, where USC and UCLA are going next year, I mean, we see all these root canal games. You know, if you've seen one Iowa 12-9 game, you've seen them all. Just wanting to just claw your eyes out with a spork. So, and people will say, oh, these offenses are so mediocre. USC and UCLA coming in like they're going to have it high on the hog. But of course, you know, that's a very simplistic analysis because these Big Ten defenses are the real deal. The front sevens, the linemen, the linebackers, and certainly, I mean, now UCLA has a defense which is ready to engage in an old style slugfest with Kirk Ferentz right now. Like UCLA and Iowa, if they played, it would be 12-9, 9-6. That's how it happened. The over-under would be 29.5. But you know, with USC, like this, USC's line play is not ready as it is for the Big Ten. With that in mind, you know, do you think that USC needs to make some changes to its strength and conditioning program? Do you see that piece under Benny Wiley as being something that's holding USC back right now?
I think that there's a multi-tier level to the Big Ten. And historically, yes, it's, you know, more physical. It's the, you know, 3 yards and a cloud of dust kind of plays. And that's still true, although I think you have a hard time looking at Ohio State the past couple of years and calling them a 3 yard and a cloud of dust offense when they have such elite level players at receiver. And they've had the quarterback play that they've had. Michigan, you know, certainly has opened it up a little bit here and there. I think that they're the teams that are still that grounded out, pounded out kind of style are the next level of schools. In other words, you've got Ohio State and Michigan up here. And I'm not putting Penn State up there until James Franklin can beat a top 5 ranked school. Penn State's down here in the next tier. And so you've got, the Penn States, you've got Iowa, you've got, Maryland's having a good year this year, but historically they're an afterthought. Those are the more physical ones, but those are also the ones that are susceptible to getting beat with 2 or 3 big plays by your own offense. If it's, UCLA against Iowa, 2 to 3 big plays out of the UCLA offense and the game's over, because while Iowa's very physical, it's not a fast-paced offense. So if you can speed up the pace of the game on your end, I don't think you have to worry as much about the physicality specifically of an offensive line, because USC and UCLA and Washington and Oregon have to go to that conference playing who they are. I don't think you want to see them try to transform into some Midwest Nebraska style football. You're going to go and you're going to play who you are and make Northwestern and Michigan State and Nebraska and Iowa change their ways to come beat you. If Kalen DeBoer stays at Washington, and I say if, he's not going to all of a sudden change this high-powered offense. He's not going to have Michael Penix, but he'll have someone else step in running the same offense, and they'll be putting up a lot of points. And certainly, if Dan Lanning stays at Oregon, the same thing. They'll be putting up a lot of points. So I don't worry too much about the Big Ten is, a physical beef boy conference. Is our offensive line big enough? USC is going to go play USC football and make Nebraska beat them at their game.
We got a super chat. Adam, great supporter of the show, but we couldn't sign off, Adam, on this early when you called into the call-in show, and I'm not sure if you're going to get much traction from the other 2 guys, but I'll go ahead and say it. Adam says, thank you for $20 super chat. Hire Jimbo as the OC and go after Glenn Schumann, Will Muschamp, Derek Mason, or Jim Knowles for DC.
Okay, well, I'm going to say I like Adam's sense of humor. That's good. I appreciate that, because I'm only going to assume this is Adam's sense of humor. There is no world in which Jimbo Fisher goes to USC as an offensive coordinator. If you know the terms of Jimbo's buyout, the headline is $77 million. That's fine, whatever. The real point of Jimbo's buyout is 25% of it is due in the next 60 days. And that part gets paid by the boosters, the donors. It's actually in the contract that 25% is not being paid by the school. It's being paid by outside sources. So there's the first 20 million that he's getting paid, and that's within 60 days. The rest of it gets paid by the school over the remaining years of his contract, which I believe is 5 more years on the contract. If he takes a high-paying job at USC, we'll entertain Adam's thoughts here, that money that he gets paid from USC, only a portion of it gets taken out of the Texas A&M money. In other words, he does not have a traditional offset clause in his contract, whereas the money that you get paid from your next job gets reduced from what the school owes you. It's actually prorated in his Texas A&M contract, so he's still going to get most of the money from the school. All of that to say, why in the world then would you go be an offensive coordinator anywhere or at USC, where, let's face it, Jimbo would be a complete fish out of water in a place like LA, a structure like USC. I'm looking at the other names there. Glenn Schumann, Will Muschamp, never been a Will Muschamp guy. Derek Mason, I actually know personally. I think Derek's a terrific defensive coordinator. But I'm not sure I see Derek Mason and Lincoln Riley as the ideal pairing. And you're not going to get Jim Knowles to leave Ohio State to be the defensive coordinator at USC. No, not at all, period.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's been a lot of criticism of Jimbo's offense in the past couple of years.
Exactly.
And we have the best, arguably, I would say the best offense.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, with this offensive line, we're still 5th in the country.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, with this defense just putting a lot of pressure on the offense, we're still 5th in the country. It's not like we have a bad offense, is my point.
Jimbo is recruited on defense. He's recruited on both sides of the ball. But Jimbo Fisher, here's a stat for you. He's been at Texas A&M for 7 years, and he is yet to have a wide receiver drafted. And it's not like he hasn't recruited 4- and 5-star wide receivers. He's had 0 drafted that he signed. Christian Kirk would be the last. He was from the Sumlin regime. He only had 2 at Florida State, and they were 5th and 7th rounders. Rashad Green, and I'm not coming up with the other receiver that was drafted. So we only had 2 at Florida State. Obviously hasn't developed the quarterback position out of that guy. Jameis Winston would be the exception. Right. Yeah, to Tim's point, one of the main reasons Jimbo Fisher's out of a job is that his offense no longer works. So that you've got the guy to run the offense. He's already the head coach. Yeah, I do like Will Muschamp as a defensive coordinator. I think he's pretty exceptional. Derek Mason, when he was at Stanford, oh my goodness. And even at Vandy, considering what he had to work with, did a really good job. Yeah, Jim Knowles is right now, I looked this up the other day, I believe he's the highest paid coordinator in college football. So most likely he's most likely.
Yeah, and whatever it took for Ohio State to keep him, they would run out to the bank that day and take care of it. The last thing Ohio State wants right now is any disruption in the core, coaching, the coordinators and the top guys to Ryan Day. So yeah, he's not a candidate. Yeah, look, Mason did a good job. He was at Oklahoma State for a year. The thing you got to worry about with Mason is that he left Oklahoma State because he was burning out. He was only there a year, and it wasn't a problem within the program. He left of his own volition. He's doing some TV work now, and he's fine. He's very buttoned up. I don't think he wants to stay in TV forever, but you got to kind of do a check-in with Derek to see how he's feeling about where he wants his future to be in 2, 3, 4 years, because he left because he was burning out on coaching.
And one more follow again. Thank you so much, Mark. If you want to grab this one, is that we have another super chat from Adam.
Adam, thank you so much for that, Guy. I love the show, and this is the last time I will say this. Lincoln Riley is not a head coach. He has no regard for defense and never did at Oklahoma. We need to recognize that he is not the future for SC.
Disagree.
I would just say, Adam, can we please just wait for the defensive coordinator hire? Can we just do that? Just a couple of weeks, and then we'll see. We'll see how serious he is with this hire.
Adam loves SC. He bleeds Cardinal gold, and I'm with you, man. Like the frustration. We all got a little bit, high on those fumes from last year. There are a lot of those games. I think one of the people are seeing his coach talk, but Lincoln Riley, I took as candid. He said, there are a lot of games last year that went our way, broke our way. We had a great season. He says those same things are breaking the other way right now, and we lost. He knows there's deficiencies on this team. He's 0 for 1. Remember, he hired Mike Stoops. So he's 0 for 1 on hires, clearly failed, clearly a huge miss on the gamble to retain Grinch this year. Let's see what Jen Cohen and Riley can get together for this hire. Then we'll begin to talk about how much he cares about defense.
I think you bring up a great point. Let's see how serious he is with the hire. I think that's a great way to put it. Let's see how big he swings for this hire.
Tim has taken exception to my coach's rankings in the past. I haven't thought as highly of Lincoln Riley, but compared to that, I've certainly ranked him as a top 10-ish head coach in the country.
Mark, but
Get
yes.
him right
Yeah,
in that range.
I
of
think
the
that's
top
accurate.
10.
Ish. With the ish, I think that's accurate.
After this season, it's definitely ish.
Yeah,
Well,
I hit him like 10 or 12 last year. Whatever.
Heading into this season, there was no ish.
Well, I think the
I was a visionary.
Yeah, I think the loss to Tulane added ish to the
Fair.
number. That
Fair.
was a tough one to swallow because it didn't have to happen. I like Willie Fritz. He's a great coach doing great things at Tulane, but I think that, that's for USC fans, you scratch your head at the idea of losing to Tulane, because there are USC fans who, couldn't tell you where Tulane is. So, just because USC lives up in this stratosphere and Tulane is somewhere else over here, in a lot of the USC fans' eyes, so that one was a tough one to swallow. Look, UCLA losing to Pitt in the bowl game last year was a brutal loss for Chip. That was his only bowl game, because obviously we don't count the non-existent Holiday Bowl. So that was his only bowl game. And, that was really, for a lot of people, the end, even though he had some talent coming in this year. And so he's got the 6-4 record now. He's lost 2 in a row, sliding backwards at the end of the season. But it really, if you go back to a lot of people who were on his side but have gone to the we've given up side, it started last year with the bowl game.
Tony, I feel as though when I ask this question, I'm revisiting about 25 of our previous conversations and possibly actually foreshadowing maybe a future conversation in the next week or two.
Sure.
But what was Chip Kelly's undoing at UCLA? And before I allow you to answer that question, of course, I don't know that, time separates us from certain accomplishments, and people forget what he did at Oregon. It's astounding because it wasn't capped off with a national championship. They came that close, of course, in 2010. I think people don't assess it, but 33-3 in what was a really good conference at the time.
Stunning.
They were elite.
Yeah.
They were so good. And beyond that, he was on the cutting edge of everything, offensive linemen, light offensive lines in space, and all the things that he did. And, it doesn't take long for people to catch up. He comes to UCLA in the first few years. And I remember having the conversation with you, Tony, when he was hired at UCLA, as I assessed the roster and said, this is what I'm seeing, Tony. Is this accurate? I'm seeing a UCLA roster that was built by Jim Moore, that based on the recruiting rankings, which truly meant something then because there was no transfer portal that was, significant, that UCLA roster matched the recruiting rankings of the teams that he was, placing in the top 3 in the country. So he had talent when he got there. I know he doesn't love recruiting, but he somehow made it work at Oregon.
Yeah.
What was his undoing?
I don't think that there's one specific thing, Mark. I really don't. I think, one, you talked about what he did at Oregon, and again, his conference record was just staggeringly good. But his offense was transformational to college football. You and I have been doing this long enough. One of my favorite coaches to sit down and talk with was David Shaw. I love talking to David Shaw because he would talk to you about any topic in sports, and he had research in the back of his head that he could quote at the drop of a hat, and stats and who wrote this research paper, and it was phenomenal. And he would talk a great deal about what Chip did at Oregon and how it changed college football. That's just it, though. Chip left, and Chip went on, Philadelphia, San Francisco, ESPN, and college football changed, and, Chip, not so much. That's not to say he's trying to run the same thing at UCLA that he did at Oregon. He's not, because he can't. He doesn't have the speed athletes that he had at Oregon, because, man, those teams were just fast. They were really they would just kill you with speed, even on defense. They would just, lightning fast linebackers, quick edge rushers. It was really just something to watch. So he doesn't have the same here, but when he came to UCLA, and there was always this storyline that UCLA beat out Florida for Chip Kelly. UCLA beat out UCLA. UCLA didn't beat out anybody for Chip Kelly. Florida had 6 visits with Kelly in a window where nobody else was calling Chip Kelly. UCLA hadn't fired Jim Mora yet, and they couldn't convince Chip Kelly to go to Florida. He wasn't going to Florida. It was UCLA or back to ESPN. They had their chance at Chip and couldn't close the deal. He comes in, and he is the biggest hire in the history of UCLA football, and he knows it. And over the first 2 years, there was a changeover of 82 players that left the program, either of his volition or their own. They saw the writing on the wall. Some of these guys were exceedingly talented, man. I mean, you got a guy like Jalen Phillips, who's having, great years in the NFL. He was shoved out the door by Chip under the guise of, medically not cleared anymore because of concussions. He had a couple of good years at Miami with no problems and playing well in the NFL with no issues. It's just he and Chip weren't going to be able to get along. There were a lot of players like that. You're then creating from scratch. How many times did Chip tell us in his first year, oh, we're doing the best we can. We've only got 60 scholarship players, though, and we're relying a lot on walk-ons. Well, yeah, because you shoved guys out the door. I mean, I mean, whose fault is that, And so there was that really for 2 years. We're just trying to rebuild. And in the meantime, he's got losing records. He's losing to teams he shouldn't lose to. Then there was the stubbornness, which we talked about. Look, I covered 1 year of Moore. I covered 4 years of Chip. I covered a year of Sonny Dykes at SMU. I'm now on year 2 of Dave Clawson at Wake Forest. They're all very stubborn. Coaches are inherently stubborn. You have to be a successful coach, because you have to believe what you're doing is the way, the right way. If you have even a modicum of doubt, the job will wash over you. But most coaches can say, I need some changes. I need to make some tweaks. This isn't working. Chip refused that for 4 years. He refused to acknowledge. We would ask him at practice. We would get our 8 minutes twice a week with Chip. Why is the defense still so bad? Why are you relying on Azanaro so much? And he would, not make Azanaro available to the media, so we couldn't ask Azanaro what in the heck he was doing out there. And 2, that he would stand by him and say, the defense, the schemes are great, the players need to execute it better. Even if that's true, even if you believe in the scheme and the players aren't executing it, you know what your job is as a coach? To change the scheme to something the players can execute. This is a column, not to digress. It's a column we published late this afternoon where I put this entire debacle of a season for Wake Forest on Dave Clawson's shoulders, which does not make me a very popular person in Winston-Salem tonight, because Dave Clawson is very, very well liked in the Wake Forest community. But the point being, you had a turnover of players and you're trying to run the same scheme. And in week 10, you're saying, turns out they don't run the scheme very well. A, why did it take you to week 10 to figure that out? And B, when you should have figured it out earlier, why didn't you change the scheme? And that was Chip with the defense. He insisted that this is our defense. and the players must adapt. I think it's the complete opposite. At some point, you realize the players can't do it. Build the defense to the talent you have on the field and let it go from there. That burned him. That burned him more than anything. It really did. It's ironic, too, because Chip didn't make any friends in the university. He's not one of those guys. You'll see Mick Cronin. You'll see Corey Close, the women's basketball coach. They're going to all the other coaches' events. Mick Cronin will show up at UCLA baseball games and sit in the stands with everybody else, watching John Savage's baseball team. Chip had to be told that he was going to the Final Four when UCLA made it a couple of years ago. He was told to go. We will get you on Casey Wasserman's plane, but you're going. You need to be a presence there. We asked Chip one time about, what's your relationship with the other coaches? You're not seeing a lot of these events. And his answer was, I go where they tell me to go. That's Chip in a nutshell. It really defines who he is. Chip doesn't like doing we talked about how he doesn't like recruiting, and he does not. He does not like sitting in the home of a 17, 18-year-old kid wanting to hear about, what this kid wants to do with his future and what he wants to do in college ball. The transfer portal was like Santa coming and gift wrapping players for Chip Kelly, because I got to talk to him a little bit in the portal, but, they're already transferring. All I got to do is pitch why we're better than this school. It's a little easier. He hates recruiting, and he has over-relied on the portal in the last 2 years and done very little high school recruiting. Getting Dante Moore was massive, and now he's misused him. So you put all that together, and like I said, I've gone on far too long. It's not one thing. It's Chip being who Chip is. At Oregon, he didn't have to rebuild anything. He was already the offensive coordinator. It was already his offense that he took over. It was already his players he recruited. He looked at UCLA as a rebuilding project, even though, as you pointed out, Mark, Jim Moore left a lot of talent there for him. So it's the stubbornness, it's the ego, it's the dismissiveness. Chip would love to not have to do booster events, not have to do media, be in his office with the films and the players and the coaches, go home to wherever it is he lives and whatever he does. He's such an enigma that while UCLA media has often known the lives of the head coaches, Chip Kelly was there a month before we even knew he was married. His wife was not at the press conference when he was announced as the new head coach. Never seen her, or at least not knowingly. Maybe she's been there and we just didn't know who it was. He is his own worst enemy. He really is.
Fascinating. Folks, this is a Trojan Conquest. We do this each and every Monday night. Unfortunately, we don't do it with Tony Siracusa every Monday night, but you can catch Tony at Last Word on College Football, and plenty of times throughout the year here at the Voice of College Football when we need him. Tony, we thank you so much for being here. I'll give it to Matt, give it to Tim if they have any parting shots or anything that they would like to send you off with.
No, I mean, I was going to ask you just, it's too late in the hour for ask you about your thoughts on special teams coaches, etc. But we'll go to somewhere else. Just one more from Adam.
Yeah.
What about what about Jesse Minter from Michigan?
Unless Minter gets in trouble with all of this, Michigan shenanigans and has to go look somewhere else, I don't see Minter looking to go somewhere else. I really don't. Michigan's defense has been really good most of the season. He's getting a lot of the credit. And so unless he gets somehow ensnared in the, Michigan sign stealing scenario, that's not easy to say. He'll still be at Michigan next year. So Look, I mean, we've gotten, again, we talked about it earlier. The firing season started really this weekend. It's come a lot earlier than it used to. It's because you want to show recruits for that early signing period. We're not sitting on our hands. We're not taking this lightly. Also because, and I hear this from coaches all across the country, they hate the December calendar. Hate it with a red hot passion. I've got coaches telling me they no longer send their assistants home for Christmas. There's no time for that. If you are good enough to be in a postseason game, whether it's the playoffs or a bowl game, you've got that. You got conference championships. You've got the early signing period. The transfer portal opens the first week of December, and you've got 30 days to maneuver that. It's insanity. And so that's another reason overall why this stuff starts to happen earlier. You've got to make whatever moves you're going to make. So I think that, you've got some more that's going to happen in the next week. Lincoln Riley doesn't have to make a decision, obviously, for a few weeks, but he's got to start making phone calls pretty soon. And like I said, I think we have a pretty good list. I think the four of us put together some pretty good names of who will be on that list. And those will happen in the next couple of weeks. And certainly as other openings happen, there will be a slew of openings next weekend. Much more than there were this weekend. There were a few. There will be more because you're heading into it's not really a throwaway game, but that Thanksgiving weekend game. UCLA plays Cal, whatever. It's those kinds of games. SC's got a bye week. I mean, that's just kind of weird to play. Without the conference championship game being in their future. When they go to a bowl game, they won't have played since, the 18th of November. That's just bizarre. But it's an advantage for Lincoln Riley because he's got time to go do things that other coaches don't have time to do right now, including going to find a new assistant coach. So I think there are some names that we know aren't going to last past next weekend. Not all of them are suitable for USC. Not all of them should be. USC is a blue blood program. It hurts coming up out of my mouth. It hurts to say that, but it is. Like I said, like Mark knows, we've talked about it. I go back. I was at one of the most famous USC games, USC Notre Dame, 1974, with Anthony Davis and that huge comeback. I was there. My grandfather, even though he took me to all the UCLA games, said you need to see a USC Notre Dame game in person, in your life. And so we went to that. And then, of course, it was a historic game. And I got to know Pat Riley, later on in years. So SC is all that. They don't have to settle. They can go big. It should be someone who Lincoln Riley doesn't already know the way he knew Alex Grinch. Go outside your comfort zone. Go outside your comfort factor and swing big.
When you said Pat Riley, did you mean Pat Hayden?
I meant Pat Hayden. Did I say Pat Riley?
Yeah.
It's 12:30 in the morning out here.
It is.
Yes.
Final note from me, Tony.
Yeah.
First off, everyone watching here at the Voice of College Football, you want to follow Tony Syracuse and his team at Last Word on College Football. Tony does an outstanding job, not just covering Wake Forest, not just covering the ACC, but obviously, as you can see here, USC, UCLA, the Pac-12, the national scene, coaching carousel. Tony does it all. He's also about to vote on some end-of-season awards. I'm sure there'll be some articles from him on that topic. So you want to follow Tony at Last Word on College Football. And my final note is I can relate to you a little more, Tony, right now, because USC is a basketball school.
All right, Matt, hang on. We'll say SC's a potentially developing basketball school. SC called
just like Louisville's a football school now.
Well, okay, there is that. SC was calling themselves a basketball school when, you know, Baby Jordan, Harold Miner was, you know, or OJ Mayo was there. So, you know, let's not get too crazy. But thanks. I appreciate the plug for Last Word on College Football. And we are doing, I will say this. If you follow us on social media or follow me on social media, you're going to start to get a lot of clues on where some of this, the award stuff is going. We had the voting panel for the Football Writers Association of America, a 3.5 hour long conference call last night, starting to pare down our All-American team. Now, I know I tell that to most people and they're like, oh my gosh, that's awful. I was so excited. I'm like, yes, I'm getting on the call. All right, man, I'm here. Just to be real quick and kind of pull back the curtain a little bit, we've got 460 members of the Football Writers Association. Everybody gets a vote for the All-American team and by position. Everyone's ballots was due midnight Thursday for the defense. First ballot was for the defense. There's a group of 20 of us who are the board of directors of the Football Writers Association. We are the final votes. And that's the 20 that are on this call. And it's guys like John Wilner from the San Jose Mercury News and Scott Dockerman from The Athletic and Andrea Adelson, you know, Emily Leiker from Syracuse.com, some great reporters. And we sit there and debate position by position. And we look at how our voters looked at everybody, and we kind of use that as a guideline. And then next week, the information will start funneling out, because we also spend time doing the Nagurski Award for the best defensive player of the year and the Outland Trophy for the best lineman. And so that stuff will start coming out. I'm also on the regular panel for the Bolitnikoff, the Lombardi, which got added this year. And there's one more, the Broyles Award for the best assistant coach in the country. So some interesting choices there. I will say this, one of the things I was kind of looking forward to, and it could happen, we don't know yet. In terms of the Nagurski Award, we're down to the 12 semifinalists, and those will get announced, I think, Thursday of this week. The semifinalists, there is the potential that Leatu Latu from UCLA, who is one of the semifinalists, could make that final group of 5. And Peyton Davis from North Carolina State, who is an outstanding linebacker, just a beast. I want this to happen. I want them both to be in the final 5, because it would mean Chip Kelly and Dave Doran would be in the same room together for the first time since the Holiday Bowl debacle, and them not speaking to each other. I want this to happen. Now, of course, that would also require Chip Kelly still has his job in early December, but that would just be because I'm one of the I'm one of the presenters at the award at the Charlotte Touchdown Club, and so that would just be so much fun.
Well,
just make sure somebody UCLA lets him know he has to be there. That's important.
Exactly. Yeah, someone's got to tell Chip he has to go.
But like, if you're thinking about bowl matchups, UCLA NC State is one, and USC Oklahoma in the Alamo Bowl would be the other. I mean, my God.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And while we're at it, let's get Notre Dame and LSU together.
Oh,
there you go.
There you go. That would be fun.
What, Gator Bowl? Gator Bowl? They could meet in the Gator Bowl.
Sure.
That's
you
conceivable.
Well know, Mark, yeah, as you well know, we get Kevin McGuffey every week with the bowl projections. They come out tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time, so they'll be there. And his accuracy rating is really pretty off the charts. He's good at this. So we'll have our latest projections out tomorrow at 9 o'clock Eastern.
Not that it would happen, but that might be the only scenario that Caleb Williams plays in that bowl game. But even that probably wouldn't entice him.
Probably not. I would expect him to sit out the bowl game. You know.
And Tony, thank you so much for the wake-up call. It's getting me to dive in my Gmail, and I'm looking at the All-America ballot right now that I need.
Yeah.
to work on.
The second ballot is due this week for the offensive players, which, is gonna be tough. I'm supposed to, my email at this time of year, I get about 50 to 60 per week from sports information directors around the country, pitching this player for that award, this player for the All-American team. But I enjoy it. It's not even remotely, close to a complaint. I love what I do, love the people I work with. I'm laughing because I'm just now realizing there are all these comments coming up on the side which I had not been paying attention to, and someone put Tony Siragusa, the goose is here. That's Mark very well remembers what happened last year when Tony Siragusa passed, and Jim Irsay of the Colts put out a tweet misspelling his former player's name and spelling it like mine, and said, "We mourn the passing of our friend Tony Siragusa." And my wife's emails and text messages blew up. What happened to Tony? I just saw the tweet from the Colts. What happened? And my wife texted me saying, "What in gosh name is going on with you today?" I had to tell her what happened. And Jim Irsay, I still have a screenshot of that. Jim Irsay never corrected it. He left it up there with the wrong spelling. So whenever my time on this earth does come, I'll already have, gotten thoughts and prayers from Jim Irsay.
That is tremendous.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I don't know that we can close down the show any better than that.
This show's dead.
All right. Well, Matt and Tim, thanks, guys. Appreciate it hanging out with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony.
We will, on this side, we will be rooting hard for UCLA with only moderate expectations, frankly. But we will, we'll try to do what we can. The daughter is coming over. She lives a few hours away. She's coming over to watch the game, and this is a child that I raised. That when she was tailgating with us, she used to tell people, "You can't put the ketchup and the mustard on the same side of the burger because the two colors don't go together." So that's the way we roll around here. So have a good week, guys.
Thank you so much, Tony.
All right, Mark, we'll talk to you soon. Be well.
You as well. One of the best, Tony Siragusa, last word on college football. Absolutely. Well, guys, we have gone overtime this week, but certainly it was worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really quickly, I went out there. We have 154 you guys on right now. We're trying to get to 4,500 subs, you guys. So if you aren't subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Actually, down here in the corner below me. It means a lot to us. Lets us know that you guys like the content we're getting out. But also, we're trying to bring guys in Mark knows Tony, but I mean, we're trying to bring some really amazing guests like Tony on for you guys. And the more subs we got, the more opportunities we will have. So thank you all for being here. But if you could just hit that subscribe. We want to get to 4,500 really soon.
Absolutely.
And
Matt, anything before we head on out? Anything in regards to your work?
Yeah, Colin Show Friday, correct, Tim?
That's right. Friday, 6:00. Bosco playoff game. Tentatively, that's why you got to be subscribed. It's either going to be Thursday or 6 o'clock if I'm going to the Bosco game. So make sure you are subscribed. We'll let you guys know.
Folks, we're going to start putting all the shows around at different times on different days just to get everyone to subscribe. You're going to have to subscribe because you're going to have no idea when our shows are going to be on. That's going to be our approach.
And my one Trojans Wire plug, I have an updated big board, carousel primer, scenarios, plot points, just getting all the following the bouncing ball, the moving parts. I have my November 13 updated coaching carousel scenario. So that's the article you definitely want to read if you want to stay abreast of this defensive coordinator search at Trojans Wire.
Eddie, thank you so much for the super chat contribution. If there's one final spot and both Texas and Alabama have one loss, who gets in? That's a complicated situation, Eddie. I will say it this way, that the further that game is in the rearview mirror, the more it favors Bama, especially if they would have to beat Georgia in an SEC championship game, and that would be a remarkable win, of course. But it was head-to-head, it was on the road, and it was 2 scores, and I hate to take that off of Texas's resume, but their overall resume is not going to compare by the end of the year to Alabama's.
And one last thing, I couldn't do this while we had Tony on, so I'd be disrespectful, but yes, the Bruins are pretty easy to mess with. This Trojan Blade, you guys know him as Gabe. Gabe, thank you so much. You've been tweeting out all of our shows. You've got a huge following, and it's been really helpful on our shows. Make sure you guys are checking out Gabe's work over at Trojan Blade as well. Just put out a great video about what happened up in Eugene. You'll be happy to check that out if you do.
Thank you, Gabe. Appreciate it. Join us next week, everyone. Trojan Conquest Live. Number 79 will be next Monday. Of course, we got USC, UCLA post-game right here at the Voice of College Football. And we will make it on back here next Monday at 8 Pacific time to wrap up that 12 games and look forward to pretty much National Signing Day will be the next story on the horizon, in addition to that defensive coordinator search, of course. So we will see you back here next Monday. And again, USC, UCLA post-game.